We have a country that is going to be very rich. It's a country that we're very proud of, but it's going to be very rich.
As Trump tariffs create global uncertainty and rattle stock markets, the auto sector finds itself caught firmly in the crosshairs. Annetta has been looking at the impacts of the trade turmoil on Volkswagen, as well as other challenges facing the German giant.
President Trump's trade war not inspiring a jobs boom. In fact, it seems to be doing the opposite. Last week's dismal jobs report showed hiring is weak. Just 22,000 jobs added last month. The unemployment rate rose to the highest level in 4 years.
Few anticipated it. One of the biggest manufacturers in the world is secretly considering a move that would shock Wall Street and Washington: the potential to withdraw from the US market. But because Volkswagen is suffering greatly as a result of the very tariffs intended to save American jobs. A 27.5% import tax has made every car shipment a liability, deducting billions from yearly projections and more than $1.3 billion in the first half of 2025 alone. Previously predicted to reach 6%, margins have been cut to 4%, leaving little space for expansion, much less aspiration. Nobody wants to acknowledge the fact that Audi and Porsche, Volkswagen's crown jewels, are the most vulnerable. Every model they bring across the Atlantic is already weakened by tariffs, their luxury advantage turned into a financial burden, as they have no factory in the United States. Here's the question. What message does Volkswagen convey to the rest of the world's car industry if it truly decides that America is no longer worth the fight? And when the options start to diminish, how much will US consumers have to pay? If you're finding this eye-opening, please hit the like button before we start. We are able to beat the algorithm thanks to it. This is the twist that is more relatable. Volkswagen's balance sheet isn't the only place suffering. American consumers are already feeling the effects of it. That 27.5% tax doesn't just disappear. It is passed on to car buyers dollar for dollar. A car that used to cost $27,000 is suddenly approaching $30,000 or even $33,000. Analysts caution that customers may have to spend an additional $3,000 to $6,000 over the previous price, depending on where the model is from. Customers were most negatively impacted by the $3,000 to $6,000 price increases this year. Families looking for cars around $30,000, the exact price range that was meant to reflect value, are the ones who will be most severely affected by this shock. Furthermore, the sticker price is just one aspect of it. The expense of just keeping a car on the road has increased due to the new levy on imported parts used for maintenance and repairs. The combination of high prices and limited supply is proving to be poisonous for dealerships in the Midwest and the South. Once stable, sales numbers are now approaching all-time lows. Which begs the awkward question: who is being protected when the purported safety net for American industry turns out to be hurting its own citizens? You probably care if you've read this far. Think about signing up to receive updates. However, the dealership is not where the narrative ends. In addition to raising prices, the tariffs disrupt the entire process that brings automobiles into the United States. What used to cross borders with ease is now coming to a complete stop. Under new tariff enforcement, Mexican shipments that were previously traveling by rail into U.S. assembly networks are now being halted. Due to the 25% import charge, cars from Europe are clogging up American ports and becoming stuck in a legal maze. Thousands of cars stay dormant, their future undetermined, rather than leaving the lot. Volkswagen was compelled to take a drastic step in response to this stalemate, adding a so-called import fee to pass some of the cost on to consumers. However, this temporary fix merely serves to exacerbate customer annoyance and runs the danger of further reducing demand. The question that arises if this logjam persists is whether Volkswagen's entire U.S. sales network can withstand the pressure or if the market is being subtly choked by its own regulations. The hidden cost becomes even more ominous. Buyers paying more or cars stalled at ports aren't the only issues. The livelihoods of American workers are currently at risk. Tens of thousands of people whose jobs depend on Volkswagen's presence in the U.S. will be the first to suffer if the company reduces its operations or leaves the U.S. completely. More than 1.3 million people are employed in the auto industry in North America. Additionally, shock waves radiate outward when one link in that chain breaks. The stability of the big automakers is crucial for the service, contractor, and supplier sectors. Others will unavoidably feel the pull if one giant falters. Because of this, there are already rumors that European manufacturers other than Volkswagen are re-evaluating their own long-term commitments out of concern that they would fall into the same tariff trap. Even factories that were long thought to be invincible, such as BMW's enormous South Carolina plant that supplies the US car industry with 11,000 employment, suddenly seem vulnerable. Costs would increase and output would decrease if production started to move abroad, possibly for years. The irony is glaring. American employment could be eliminated as a result of a policy intended to preserve them. How many towns that relied on the car industry's promise would be left to pick up the pieces if that were to occur? Volkswagen's luxury divisions are being squeezed the most if the company as a whole is under strain. Even the group's most prestigious brands, Audi and Porsche, rely only on imports to get to the US market. Now, that reliance is a vulnerability. Every vehicle has a tariff built into the price, eliminating the competitive advantage that once made these brands alluring. Porsche, in particular, is in a difficult situation because of both the slow Chinese market and US tariffs. Its global presence is becoming a collection of expensive bottlenecks rather than a source of growth. It's not getting any better for Audi. Since there is no domestic facility to protect it, the brand is equally vulnerable and cannot use local production to offset the duties. The end effect is a somber slowness. Exuberant forecasts of 5% growth have fallen back to flat performance, meaning there was virtually no increase over the previous year. This stalemate is more than just a financial setback for a business that depends on momentum and reputation. It's a red flag for your reputation. And this is where the more profound conundrum shows up. How long before Volkswagen decides the US market is no longer worth the battle if its main brands are unable to withstand the tariff storm? Of course, there are more options besides simply leaving. Volkswagen has been looking for a lifeline, any way to maintain its presence in the US without further deteriorating behind the scenes. The most dramatic choice would be to speak with Washington directly about the potential for establishing a brand new Audi plant in the United States. A multi-billion-dollar investment that is presented as evidence of commitment to the US market in exchange for exemption from harsh tariffs seems like a great idea on paper. Volkswagen may hope for a break from the financial shackles, while officials could point to additional jobs as proof of victory. However, the tiny print presents a different picture. It would take years, not months, to localize production, and the price would be exorbitant. How much market share would be lost before the manufacturing doors opened? What percentage of customers would have switched to other brands? For this reason, the question is still open. Is this enormous expenditure only a costly bet that postpones the ultimate retreat, or is it a true rescue plan? Pressure from tariffs causes Audi and Porsche to fail. It is clearly evident that the consequences go well beyond Volkswagen's financial situation or the immediate spike in consumer pricing. The harm from the corporation cutting back won't just be measured in lost sales. The decline in America's industrial standing could be used as a gauge. Signals are closely monitored by manufacturers throughout the world, and once the US market starts to seem unwelcoming rather than friendly, the impression spreads alarmingly quickly. Once thought to be the best place to invest, the nation is now viewed as uncertain, expensive, and politically unstable. The ramifications are more extensive than Washington would be willing to admit. Once a pillar of continental trade, US auto exports to neighbors like Canada and Mexico might easily turn into collateral damage. One of the arteries that has traditionally supported American manufacturing might be severed if retaliatory measures, tariffs, quotas, or altered supply arrangements cut those exports in half or more. Such a decrease would be crippling for an industry that is based on efficiency and scale. Meanwhile, the local level of trust is being undermined, which is a less obvious but no less deadly effect. A consistent supply of imported models and parts is essential to American dealerships, repair facilities, and service centers. Restricting that flow causes revenues to plummet, leaving companies in regional centers and smaller towns fighting for survival. With fewer jobs and dwindling consumer confidence, communities that formerly prospered on a balanced mix of native and foreign companies may find themselves hollowed out. Above all, it could be most difficult to heal the symbolic damage. In the premium and luxury market, the American-made brand that was formerly known for dependability and leadership in the world runs the risk of losing its luster. Prestige will move elsewhere if competitors in Asia or Europe can offer more competitive prices and seamless trade flows while the US is enmeshed in tariff conflicts. In other words, protection on paper might not actually protect America from deterioration. It might hasten the very irrelevance it aims to prevent. At this point, the narrative expands beyond Volkswagen. One of the biggest automakers in the world, pulling out would create a precedent that would be difficult for others to follow. What message does it convey to all other foreign manufacturers doing business in the United States if tariffs are able to force out a corporation of this size? You can immediately see the warning flags. Economists warn that prosperity is rarely created by tariff walls. They frequently choke it. The very regulations that were promoted as protection are now being accused of having detrimental effects on wealth and progress, not just in the US but also in other interconnected markets. Volkswagen wouldn't last long on its own if it took a back seat. Soon, more businesses may follow, which would lessen competition and limit the options available to American consumers. The irony is incisive. Instead of paying less, consumers wind up paying more. Furthermore, the country may find itself in a weaker position in the long run as a result of the limited options available to the so-called Volkswagen Way's exit versus new US plant protection of the American car industry. Thus, this is the unanswered question. Is US industry being subtly undermined from inside by these policies, or are they actually protecting it? This brings us to our last conclusion. What does it say about the future of US competitiveness if Volkswagen, a behemoth of the global auto industry, believes that America is too expensive to remain in? Could this be the initial domino in a series of events that alters the equilibrium of the global car industry as a whole? Or is this really a short-term stalemate in a larger industrial power struggle? If this video made you think, please like and subscribe to help fund future videos like this one. Thank you.